When the truck finally reached Elijah, the driver, an elderly woman, hurried out and rushed to his side. "Are you all right?" she asked, kneeling beside him. There was no response. Already panicking, she reached into the passenger seat, grabbed her phone, and dialed 911. As she spoke with the dispatcher, she heard rustling in the woods nearby. "Is someone there?" she shouted, her voice trembling. The woman was a local farmer who had been on her way to work when she stumbled upon the scene. Fearing that whoever had attacked Elijah might still be nearby, she retrieved a shovel from the back of her truck and held it tightly. "If anyone is there, come out now," she yelled. "The police are on their way." Hearing this, the attacker fled deeper into the woods. His heavy footsteps echoed through the dry leaves and broken twigs. "Come out, you coward!" the woman shouted. But no one emerged. Elijah remained unconscious until paramedics and police arrived at the scene. He was immediately transported to the nearest hospital, located about 25 kilometers from his community home. His wife and several close family members, including Mark, were informed of the incident. Mark was disappointed that the attack had failed. Later, he learned from Elijah's wife that his brother had suffered a serious head injury and remained unconscious. Doctors expected him to recover within a matter of days. That news unsettled him. For years, Mark had blamed Elijah for standing between him and everything he had ever wanted. Now, as he sat alone with his thoughts, resentment hardened into something far darker. 2 days before Elijah was expected to regain consciousness, Mark visited him in the hospital. He sat quietly beside the bed for several moments before speaking. "Don't take this personally, brother," he said softly. "Sometimes life doesn't give us what we want." His voice trembled. "You never understood what it feels like to spend your whole life reaching for something, only to watch it be handed to someone else." Tears filled his eyes. For a moment, he looked like a man at war with himself. Then he made a decision from which there would be no return. As he sat beside Elijah's bed, years of jealousy, bitterness, and desperation finally consumed whatever remained of his conscience. He held a pillow over Elijah's face to finish the job the homeless man had started. He couldn't watch Elijah's defenseless body struggling, so he turned his face to the side with his eyes shut tightly as he pressed the pillow harder over his face. When it was over, the room fell silent. Mark stared at his brother for several seconds, as though expecting him to wake up and prove that none of it had happened. Panic immediately replaced anger. Mark stumbled from the room and began calling for help. "He's not breathing!" he shouted. "My brother isn't breathing!" Nurses and physicians rushed past him and into the room. "Please step outside," one of them said urgently. As medical staff worked frantically to save Elijah's life, Mark stood frozen in the hallway. For the first time, the reality of what he had done settled over him, and it felt heavier than anything he had ever carried before. As Mark shut the door behind him, leaving the nurses and physicians scrambling to revive Elijah, the reality of what he had done finally began to settle in. For a brief moment, his face didn't feel like his own. He rushed through the hospital corridors and out to his car. His breathing was heavy, almost frantic. When he reached for his keys, they slipped from his trembling hand and clattered onto the pavement. It felt as though he was having a panic attack. "Keep it together," he whispered to himself. "Keep it together." He repeated the words with every shaky breath until he finally managed to start the engine and drive away. Elijah's death shocked everyone who knew him. Many struggled to understand why anyone would want to harm such a humble, compassionate, and God-fearing man, a man who had dedicated so much of his life to helping the vulnerable members of his community. Based on the autopsy report and the testimony of the elderly woman who had found Elijah unconscious on the trail, Police launched a homicide investigation in an effort to identify whoever was responsible. Meanwhile, Mark's conscience had already made an arrest, and unlike the police, it knew exactly where to find him. Sleep became impossible. Night after night, he was tormented by nightmares. Weeks passed, and he rarely left his house. His fiancée and family members began to worry, believing that the loss of his brother was taking a devastating emotional toll on him. One afternoon, after forcing himself to swallow several sleeping pills in a desperate attempt to rest, Mark drifted into a dream. He found himself sitting alone on a park bench. In the distance, he saw a younger version of his father walking toward him. The moment he recognized him, Mark ran forward and embraced him. Both of them laughed and cried as they held each other. "You're here," Mark said through tears. "Yes, son, I am," his father replied. Mark held him tighter. "I'm sorry you had to go through life carrying all this grief and pain," his father continued. "There was nothing I could do to help you." "You can still help me, Dad," Mark pleaded. His father's expression changed. "No, son." The words landed heavily. "You've committed the first crime that you will have to live with for the rest of your life." Mark woke up suddenly. His heart pounded against his chest. He felt worse than he had before falling asleep. For the first time, he became convinced that the police would eventually come for him. Whether it happened tomorrow or years from now didn't matter. He couldn't bear the thought. The investigation, the guilt, the nightmares, the crushing weight of a conscience that refused to let him rest. So he disappeared. When detectives eventually arrived at his multi-million-dollar home, they found it empty. Mark was gone. Not even his fiancée, friends, or closest relatives knew where he had gone. His social media accounts, once followed by hundreds of thousands of people, fell silent. The audience he had spent years building was left confused. Business contacts, ministry connections, and loyal followers were suddenly cut off without explanation. The disappearance made it nearly impossible for investigators or anyone else to determine his whereabouts. Months passed. The investigation into Elijah's death slowly lost momentum. There wasn't enough evidence to charge anyone. Leads dried up. Life moved on. Mark thought he had escaped. He hadn't. He abandoned social media, withdrew from his fiancée, and isolated himself from everyone who had once admired him. Going to church or any social event became unbearable. Praying felt heavy and impossible for him because of the guilt he carried. Every attempt to distract himself only amplified the silence waiting for him whenever he was alone. The nightmares never stopped. One of them was seeing Elijah lying in the hospital bed. Other times, he would dream of when they were children again, kneeling beside one another to say their bedtime prayers. And as they prayed, he would watch his younger brother pray with a sincerity and true faith that he had never possessed in all his life, while he repeated words he had never truly meant. Years passed, but his guilt did not weaken. Rather, it matured. People believed justice had failed because Elijah's killer was never arrested or identified. But they were wrong, because Mark was imprisoned by his guilt and shame every morning. He would wake up to the memory of what he had done, and every night he went to sleep knowing exactly who he had become. He had spent his entire life desperate to be the favored son. In the end, he inherited neither peace nor purpose, only himself. And that was punishment enough.